Generalizations are unfair, but so is life. Suck it up. For the purposes of convenience, and of causing further offence, I've attempted to adopt a sort of Linnaean system of taxonomy, which, now that I've finished the book, I've realised doesn't really work. Chapter 1. Genus Peritus, Expert. If your knowledge of Latin is as woeful as mine, then you could be forgiven for assuming, as I did, that this refers to an unsavoury part of the nether regions. It does not. It means expert. This kind of customer is, on the whole, a self-appointed expert who does not have the benefit of a regular audience on which to inflict his or her wisdom. Unlike most academics or recognised industry commentators, who generally deal in fact-based, well-informed opinion, and who have groups of students and readers keen to hear what they have to say, most of the autodidactic types that follow have no such eager audience. As always, there are exceptions, and in their ranks can be counted some of the kindest customers I'm fortunate enough to encounter. The rest, though, are eye-wateringly tiresome. There is nothing that the expert likes more than to use long words where short, simple language would suffice. Stamp collecting becomes philately, looking at birds becomes ornithology, and an unhealthy obsession with insects becomes entomology. It's as though they've dined out and eaten Will Self for main course, followed by Jonathan Meades and Stephen Fry for dessert. The difference being that Self and Meades and Fry have all swallowed, digested and understood the full Oxford English Dictionary, and know precisely how to use the correct word in the right situation to bestow clarity upon their prose, while the expert takes excruciating pains to confound the reluctant listener for nothing more than the sake of obfuscation. They know fewer than 5 long words, but splash them around with wild abandon, for no other purpose than to create the easily scratched veneer of intellectual superiority. But, as my pharmacist friend Cloda would say, hippopotamo-monstrose esquipedalianism is no excuse to make someone feel foolish for not knowing that the chemical polyvinyl pyrrolidone is a binding agent in most prescription tablets. William Faulkner and Ernest Hemingway famously argued about the use of language, with Faulkner quipping that Hemingway has never been known to use a word that might send a reader to the dictionary, to which Hemingway replied, "Poor Faulkner, does he really think that big emotions come from big words? I know all the $10 words as well as he does, but I prefer the older, simpler ones." My English teacher at school would have had a great deal more sympathy with Faulkner over Hemingway's use of the word ones, arguing that there is no plural of the word one, other than more than one or a higher number. He was also mercilessly pedantic about the word alternative, which, he maintained, had its root in the Latin word alter, meaning one of two. It was always a source of enormous pleasure in classes to suggest that there were 2 alternatives, or possibly even more. Type 1. Species Doctus, Specialist. This is the kind of person who comes into the shop for no other reason than to lecture you about whatever their field of specialist interest is, and derives a singular pleasure when you know absolutely nothing about it, as you almost certainly won't. Over the years, most specialist booksellers acquire considerable knowledge which reflects their stock, but when you have a general bookshop, like mine, it is impossible to know everything. Try telling that, though, to someone who has spent their entire adult life studying the reproductive habits of the Siberian tree snail. They will sneer at you with a supercilious look of undisguised delight and contempt in equal measure when you reveal that, no, you haven't heard of Michael Horsach's seminal work on the subject, Mollusk Assemblages in Paleological Reconstructions, an investigation of their predictive power using transfer function models. While they derive pleasure from your ignorance of their sphere of knowledge, they are incapable of really understanding why you, or everyone else for that matter, wouldn't want to spend 20 years living in a tent in a forest 50 miles from Omsk with a notebook and a microscope, examining snail excrement and reading nothing other than obscure academic papers on the subject. The marginally more socially adept members of this species are conscious that other people might not share their obscure interests. This group derives an alternative sort of gratification from the fact that their niche obsession somehow differentiates them from other people, mistakenly assuming that it makes them more interesting. We used to have a regular customer who never failed to startle us by appearing at the counter without any obvious sign of having even entered the building, and cheerily announcing his presence with the greeting, "Hello, I'm a bit weird, me. I love reading books about differential calculus." The achingly obvious reality was that, in fact,